I've made a lot of progress on cargo defense in the last week, so I'd like to start by just going through what's new, and then I'll talk about one of the central components to how this game works under the hood, the game board. First off, I've implemented dodging. This is fairly straightforward. Using a dodge action places that unit into a mode where it will react to the next incoming projectile. It then counts how many projectiles are about to hit it, and compares that to the number that would hit if it moved to any of the adjacent tiles. If that number is less for an adjacent tile, it starts a move, but that happens in real time. That means if the projectile is coming in too fast at too short of a distance, they may not be able to get out of the way in time. There was one complication to this. I was going to use raycasting to determine what projectiles would hit the unit for each space, but Godot handles physics in a multi-threaded way that doesn't react to position changes within the same frame, so I couldn't just move the unit around and cast rays each time to see what would happen. Instead, I cast the rays just once and excluded the dodging unit, so I see the full path the projectiles would take if the unit wasn't there. Then I used the handy segment intersect circle helper function provided by Godot to see how many of those paths the unit would intersect at each tile it could dodge to. Once that was working, it was time to move on to making the AI actually steal your cargo. However, I knew it would be easier to test units picking up and moving cargo if I made the player crew able to do it first. While experimenting with this, I made a few decisions. You can't attack while carrying cargo, but you can put it down at any time without spending an action. Also, if you dodge while carrying cargo, you drop it. Luckily, cargo stealing was a lot easier to write AI for than combat. The AI keeps a list of all the cargo objects it's seen. Whenever a unit isn't busy with combat, it essentially has 3 possible tasks. If it's carrying cargo, it moves toward the exit. Otherwise, if cargo has been seen that no other unit is already in the process of collecting, it moves toward that cargo, or spends an action to pick it up if it's adjacent. Lastly, if there's no known cargo left to retrieve, the AI falls through to exploration mode. Since dropping cargo doesn't cost an action, at the beginning of the decision-making process, the AI also checks if any of its units are at the exit and carrying cargo. In that case, it's immediately captured and removed from the game. In the future, I'll probably make it placed inside the enemy ship so you can steal it back. The one big missing piece so far is if cargo is no longer where the AI last saw it, it doesn't search to see where you moved it to. That's something I'll come back to later. Now that the broad strokes of the turn-based gameplay are working, I wanted to start filling in some of the surrounding pieces. When you defeat all attackers, you now get a mission end screen. Your crew now gain experience and stress. Stress happens when a unit is under fire, or accidentally deals damage to a friendly. Gaining experience levels leads to perks, and stress levels lead to anti-perks. As you can see, I just have bogus strings for these right now, but that's something I plan to flesh out next week. The enemy crew also gain experience and stress. There's currently no way for them to survive the encounter, but in the future I plan on allowing enemies to flee once they've stolen some of your cargo, and those characters persist in the universe. I'll go into more detail on that in a future video. I've also made some big improvements to my debug mode. Instead of repurposing the highlights layer, it's now a separate layer that shows lines for all the path connections. I've also added name tags and a fairly verbose text output of what the AI is doing. I've made a lot of small improvements, but the biggest one left is that enemies no longer just appear inside your ship when they breach your hull. And this is where I want to explain the game board. Each object has a position on the screen, but it's also tracked in what I call a game board behind the scenes. The board essentially has a matrix of tiles, each with a list of objects in that tile. Normally it's only one, but I was planning ahead for things like guns dropping on the floor when a unit is killed. Whenever an object enters the scene or moves between tiles, it notifies the game board to update it. This class is also responsible for managing the A-star graph for pathfinding. The AI has its own copy of the game board with a subset of what's in the master one. Until recently, the game board had a fixed size. That was partly so I could easily convert between tile coordinates and node IDs for the A-star graph, but that complicates things if you want to tack on additional tiles for an enemy ship that's just docked. I originally added a hard-coded margin of tiles around the player's ship to accommodate this, but I recently decided to make it more flexible. Instead of an array of arrays for this matrix, it's now a dictionary of dictionaries. That allows me to expand, even into negative numbers, without having to move everything around, but I'm still putting limits on how far it can go. Godot's A-star implementation doesn't allow for negative node IDs, and I still wanted a straightforward formula to convert between nodes and tile coordinates, so I decided to have a fixed size after all, but just make it very large. Since I'm using dictionaries, I'm not wasting memory on any tiles I don't actually use. Since node IDs are 32-bit signed integers, it made sense to cap the board dimensions at 46,340 by 46,340 for a total of a little over 2 billion tiles, close to the maximum signed int value. This will give me plenty of flexibility to make big ships in the future. So that's pretty much where I've left off for this week. Next week I plan on fleshing out crew and contract details. As always, thanks for watching, and if you'd like to see more of my game development journey, please consider subscribing.